Hello, everybody. We're going to get the webinar started in just a moment. As you're joining us, if you could please answer this poll, we will be talking about the results in a little bit. Thank you. Hello. Hello. Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for the webinar, Building a Resilient Innovation Culture, the Fortune 500 Way. My name is Lara Lewick, and I'm the Vice President of Customer Experience here at IdeaScale. So during the webinar today, if you happen to have any questions, please don't hesitate to share them in the Zoom Q&A section. You should be able to see on the Zoom bar, and we'll be sure to address those at the conclusion of the webinar. Also, if you have not had the opportunity yet to respond to the poll, please take a quick moment to send in your response. I will be ending that poll in just a second here. Yeah. All right, so before we dive into today's webinar, I'd like to take a moment to introduce you to IdeaScale. So we were founded in 2009 in tandem with President Barack Obama's Open Government Initiative. And at our core, we are a software company on a mission to empower organizations through innovation. You can see some of our platform stats that highlight the scale of our impact. So we proudly host over 40,000 active communities on our platform with over 3.6 million active campaigns with a staggering 4.5 million users right now. And at the heart of this, we've received over 900,000 brilliant ideas from these users. So these numbers alone don't define us. One of the areas that sets us apart is the quality of our service. So our commitment to excellence shines through in some of these support statistics. So we have an average satisfaction rating of a 96.55%, a 17-second first response time within our chat tool, and 29 minutes and 38 seconds to resolve a support ticket. And lastly, you can see some of our awesome partners over here, and our reach extends across various industries that we've had the privilege of working with. And these are some of the world's most innovative organizations. So whether you're a longtime partner, a potential collaborator, or new to IdeaScale, we are thrilled to have you join us today. Our journey is one of constant innovation, collaboration, and pushing boundaries. As we navigate today's webinar, we hope you'll come to understand not only what we do, but why we do it. And that's to empower you to harness the power of collective intelligence and drive innovation to new heights. So now I would like to introduce Todd Hart, an innovation expert with over 2 decades of experience steering the innovation ship. Todd has witnessed firsthand the challenges and opportunities that arise when building an entrepreneurial culture within large organizations. So take it away, Todd.
Okay. Share my screen. And Laura, can you see it okay?
Yep. See it perfect.
Perfect. Okay. Well, hey, as Laura said, I'm Todd Hart. And I really appreciate the chance to spend some time with this group today. We've got a lot to discuss, and so I will just kind of jump into it. I want to give a little bit of background on kind of what you're looking at here. And I would typically say this is where I'm located, but today I find myself in my basement. But most of the time, I'm here in Champaign, Illinois. So that is in central Illinois. And my operation sits inside kind of this technology ecosystem called Research Park at the University of Illinois. And you may see a couple of companies, Capital One here in the background, John Deere here, State Farm, Graybar, of course, Caterpillar, Dow. It's a really top shelf list of companies. And why I mention that is because really innovation and building a culture of innovation is about intentionality. It's about purposefulness. And, each of these companies in their own way basically have a group of individuals waking up every day thinking about innovation, thinking about ideation, thinking about idea acceleration. And it's a really, really great atmosphere. Maybe I'll have a chance to share a little bit about our specific operation, but my goal for this group today is for you to leave with some practical guidelines on building this type of culture, a culture that exudes forward thinking and innovation. I've got about 30 minutes, give or take, of content. So for those that can't hang around for the Q&A, we'll get you kind of in and out in 30 minutes, and hopefully that will be helpful. So with that, Laura, do you want to share the survey results? Okay.
Sure. Hopefully you all can see them now.
Yes.
Perfect.
So it looks like about 4 in 10 said yes, and then we've got a group a larger group that don't have, and then no one's trying to start. So maybe this is a great timing for this presentation. So let me close that, and I'm going to hop right into my next slide. I can figure that out in advance. There you go. So okay, this probably. The challenge with this kind of presentation is we're all kind of in a different place. We have some who are kind of further in the journey, some who maybe are starting the journey, some who haven't considered the journey. So this may be new to some, but probably not to most. This chart talks about innovator's dilemma, and I won't spend a lot of time on this. It's a theory. Clayton Christensen in the mid-90s surfaced this idea of an innovator's dilemma. And I'm going to pivot off that a little bit and call it an innovation dilemma. But basically, what this is about is established companies often struggle to keep up with changing customer needs while protecting their existing businesses. So there's this level of kind of protectiveness that takes place at the cost of maybe not seeing a new technology or a new entrant into the market. And so this trend that follows is what is known as an S curve. And so if you look at the red curves there, they obviously resemble an S. And the S curve trajectory is where innovation starts slowly, it gains traction, and then it plateaus in terms of market share or revenues. When a new technology enters the market, inevitably it starts lower than the existing technology, and that's kind of that shaded area there, with the potential to disrupt through lower prices, maybe higher levels of efficiency. It could be entering a new market. So some differentiation in the marketplace takes place, happens. And what I find kind of interesting is this innovation dilemma could happen quickly. I say 10 years there. It might happen in a couple of years, or it could happen over a period of 30 or more years. And so why does that matter? Well, I think large companies tend to get very comfortable in their space, And they may not see this innovation dilemma coming, especially if they've been comfortable for 30 or 40 or 50 or more years. So that's why it matters. And so I kind of wanted to set the stage there. And for the rest of the presentation, I really want to talk about why. Why does this happen? And I'm going to present 4 reasons. Let's just get them out here and we'll talk about each of them. I actually have sequenced these in order of, I would say, importance, maybe in order of most debilitating. And also I want to mention that they're not exclusive of each other. So there definitely is some kind of crossover. The first one there at the top is company culture and norms. And you've probably heard the saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And that is true. And I think that's why this is at the top of the list. A risk-averse corporate culture will make it difficult for companies to embrace new ideas, new technologies, especially when there are silos that exist inside of those organizations and incentives that exist inside of those silos. So this is the most, like I said, the most debilitating. If the company culture really resists innovation, resists forward thinking, that can be a huge challenge. The second one is limited customer insights. So VOC, if you don't know, voice of the customer. And companies may lack a deep understanding of their customers at their own peril, by the way. And often they ignore competitors and disruptive changes in the market until it's too late. I've also observed situations where customer feedback was gathered but held closely. And as time went on, it was less likely for that information, that feedback, to reach key decision makers. So we won't spend a lot of time talking about how to stand up a voice of the customer program, but just recognize that that is definitely a contributor to a lack of innovation in many large companies. The third one, I'm sure everybody sort of saw this one coming, kind of this status quo mentality. If it ain't broke, we've always done it that way. This is kind of an inertia thing. So companies that have been successful with a particular business model or a particular technology may find it difficult to change, even in the face of disruptive innovation. So this is really at the root of the innovator's dilemma. And then lastly is one that really is kind of near and dear to me, and that's strategic planning, or I guess the opposite, the antithesis of that is subpar strategic planning. Basically solid, and Laura, I should have mentioned, go ahead and launch that next poll if you wouldn't mind. Solid strategic planning involves long-term goals that might not align with disruptive change. In my experience, innovation and strategy need to be in lockstep. And I'll take it one step further. I've seen and I've been in cultures where innovation reports into IT. I've also been in cultures, currently, our culture is one in which innovation reports into strategy. And I think the latter is absolutely the most beneficial. I think that, for innovation and for the innovation process and team and program to understand the direction and, again, be in lockstep, sort of being in front of strategy and enabling strategy to happen, that's in my mind the most effective approach. So I'm going to turn the page here. If you haven't answered that question, go ahead and take a minute to do that. I'm very interested in seeing the results of this question. Okay, let's go next here. Laura, do you have the results of that at this point?
Yes, I can share them right now. There we go.
Okay. So not surprising, 3 out of 4 suggests that company culture and norms, which just happened that was at the top of the list. So maybe I maybe I know what I'm talking about. Okay, I'm going to close that out. So we've talked about the challenges, we've talked about the innovation dilemma. Let's talk about how to breed this culture of innovation. And I'm going to discuss 5, you could call them tactics, you might call them strategies. Probably strategies would be more appropriate. But I'm going to talk about 5 techniques to build a resilient culture of innovation at your firm, no matter where you are. If you're just starting out, that's totally okay. I'm not suggesting that you need all of these, and I'm also not suggesting that this is an all-inclusive list. What I'm saying is that this particular list has been a successful recipe based on my experience at large companies in the innovation space, in the strategy space. The last thing I'll mention there, well, let's just run through these quickly. So an innovation program, a formal company-wide program, we'll talk in detail about innovation learning series, courses that really breed this mentality, an internal innovation network. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then a couple of different advisory councils that I will recommend. And then certainly recognition and incentives. And that's one that I'd be interested in hearing from the group about. We'll talk more about that in just a second. But, at the end of the day, innovation takes a tremendous amount. I mentioned intentionality. It also takes a ton of grit. It takes a lot of persistence, and it takes executive support. And so that's why I have the quote there at the bottom. I'm not sure who said this, but fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy ride. So let's jump into the first one there. And I don't know why my slides don't want to advance. There it goes. Okay. So let's talk about a company-wide innovation program. Ours is called Next. Ironically, we used crowdsourcing, which we'll talk about, to generate that title. But some things to think about as you consider launching a company-wide innovation program. The first is your operating model. And what I mean by this is how do you categorize, or how do you want to categorize innovation? Where is your focus? And in our current setting, we keep it simple. We categorize innovation in 2 broad categories. One is incremental innovation, and the second is what we consider breakthrough innovation. And my operation specifically focuses on the latter category, the breakthrough operation. Now, I think there's room for both. Again, depending on how your organization is structured, you may not have the resources for both. Sometimes large companies will start with incremental and get the process in place, get I's dotted, T's crossed, and then begin to move into more of a breakthrough type of approach. So that's the first consideration is your operating model. How do you want to manage these different types of innovation? The last thing I'll mention on this particular category is steer clear of innovation or technology that is in search of a problem. What I mean by that is I've stumbled myself. I've seen, companies stumble, individuals, partners, teams stumble when they identify a technology and then try to kind of back into a problem. So it's a technology in search of a problem. My recommendation is start with the problem, start with identification of the need, the pain point, and then work through that process, overlaying technology on top of that. So just something to consider. The second arrow there is what I mentioned, like crowdsourcing. And crowdsourcing technology is beneficial. And, we use, of course, the IdeaScale platform to launch idea campaigns. We use the platform to launch innovation competitions. Ours is called an Idea Accelerator. It's a company-wide competition. So, you need a way to track and manage ideas as well as capture the wisdom of the crowd. Our organization has almost 9,000 employees. And so even though, probably less than 10% of our organization is actively involved in innovation, that's still a big number. You're still talking about almost 1,000 individuals. And so that crowdsourcing piece is really important. The last one here is KPMs. This was a new terminology that a colleague introduced me to. I've been using KPIs for 100 years, and now all of a sudden there's KPMs, which I think is key performance measures. But this is something to consider as you move down this particular path. So how do you know you're being successful? I'll throw some things out. So conversion rate, so conversion of ideas, level of employee engagement, usual suspects like revenue growth, cost savings. Just make sure that you have particular key performance measures in place, again, as you start down this path. So company-wide innovation program is essential. Let's talk about number 2, an innovation learning series. Now, this sounds really specific, but I mention this because really this is about growth. It's about learning and development. And so, how you get to town on this is up to you. These don't necessarily need to be, these learning programs don't necessarily need to be created in-house. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't spend the time creating the second course, which is the practitioner's guide, in-house. So let me talk about these. So an innovation flyover is the first course that we created. Basically, this is kind of, why is innovation important to your organization? What's in it for you? How do you get involved? How does innovation align with strategy at your organization? This is kind of a 10,000-foot flyover of innovation. The second course that we developed, I'm calling it a practitioner's guide. This is much more advanced. This is for individuals who are actively involved or want to become actively involved in innovation at your organization. So some of the questions that we answer as part of our practitioner's guide are, how do you discover and validate the need? How do you uncover and validate a solution? How do you evolve a concept from a proof? Well, I should say, how do you evolve a concept to a proof of concept? So there's a process there, or even an MVP, a minimum viable product. What's design-led thinking? Why is it important? These are all things that we probably take advantage or for granted, advantage of or for granted at our operation. If we're kind of in innovation every day, but these are things that you'll find people want to. There's a category of individuals who want to understand better, and so giving them kind of this guide is a great way to foster a culture of innovation. And then lastly on this one, some type of feedback loop. So it could be part of the actual course work. It could be another channel, but some way to know, how effective are these courses, this learning series. Okay, let's jump to the third. Hopefully I'm going through these at a decent speed. So this is one that is kind of near and dear to me, and we're calling this an internal innovation network. And we have a group of individuals at our organization. Every large company has a group of individuals who are intrapreneurs, and that's kind of a fancy word for individuals who work in a large organization that are entrepreneurial. So having a company-wide innovation program, so that first step will pretty quickly showcase who these individuals are. And we bring this group together through a Teams channel. You may have Slack at your organization. You need to have a way for these folks to connect with each other. And we kind of facilitate. It's not a structured process. It's very informal. We didn't reach out to their management and ask for approval if they could be part of this. But we really use this group of intrapreneurs as a sounding board for, sometimes it's to understand the voice of the customer. Sometimes it's to understand a particular idea, a concept, a strategy, their thoughts on that. And one point of caution here: this network is not intended to take the place of the overarching idea platform. Okay. This is more of a focused, more of a targeted group of individuals. The second category there, I mentioned L&D opportunities. So learning and development here. And it's important to keep this group particularly engaged because they're cut a little different. They have day jobs, but they spend time thinking about innovation, and they're very growth oriented. And so, there are ways to keep this group engaged. It could be an additional course, maybe that you pull together this group and kind of go through. Maybe it's webinars. Maybe you discuss a leadership title focused on innovation. They want to feel like they're being kind of put in a slightly different category, maybe get some different opportunities than most of the organization. So that's something to think about. The other awesome thing about having this internal innovation network is you immediately have individuals who want to be part of idea teams. So they're great participants to have on an idea team or a concept team as you move that idea through kind of a stage gate process. So that's kind of what we're calling an internal innovation network. I love having this group. We use them often. It's almost like a small, consulting network. And we do refresh this. I should mention that. We do refresh this on an annual basis. So 30 to 35 is our target. So it's not a large group. I mentioned an internal innovation network. I should also mention, if you can, it's great to have an external innovation network too. So we sit on the campus. Our innovation lab is constantly refreshed with new students. We can talk maybe a little bit more about that toward the end of this session. Let's see here. Boy, 30 minutes really went fast. So let's talk about an advisory council. And we have two different advisory councils. Again, this is another one that I love. We have what's called an early career advisory council. This is a group of high performing, high potential individuals with less than 3 years at the company, less than 5 years in the industry. We bring this group together as a cohort. Usually it's like a 6-month program, and it's project based. It culminates in a board presentation. And basically we consider this part of our innovation program because we launch a campaign for this particular, an idea campaign for this particular group. We start this cohort by asking them to submit kind of a big idea that has to do with profitability or has to do with growth. And then they kind of see how that process works and kind of come alongside these groups. Usually it's teams of 5, so 3 teams. I think that's a great way to instill innovation throughout the organization because they all kind of go back to their own individual areas and departments. And so that's something to consider. We call it an early career advisory council. The second council we have at our organization, I have seen effective, is an innovation council. So this is a very different type of persona. This is a cross-departmental group of key decision makers who likely have been with the organization for a period of time. This group for us looks to help allocate resources. They determine where funds are needed or which ideas should be funded. They also help kind of activate for us our innovation lab, which is kind of our secret weapon for innovation. And then I mentioned again this L&D opportunity. That's kind of a common theme in an organization that has a culture of innovation. So, we have standing and rotational members of our innovation council. I mentioned that the early career council is also kind of it's not necessarily a rotation. It's just a different cohort each year. So these are additional learning development opportunities. The last thing is recognition and incentives. And I don't want to overlook this. I think this is critical to building a culture of innovation. I'll mention a couple of things. I have some question marks there in my third kind of category. I'm interested to hear if others have ideas here as far as how do they recognize and maybe incentivize innovation. The first thing I'll mention is really more systemic than anything else. And I would recommend having innovation or creative thinking or something along those lines built in to your HR competency model. And I think it's pretty logical why that's important. You want to be able to tie this competency or these competencies we discussed to performance. And so if you have that as part of your competency library that a manager can select as they're doing, as they're kicking off their performance reviews in the year, that really helps kind of build that culture. So something to consider. The second one is, celebrate success. We have innovation competitions, both kind of at a local level as well as a company-wide level. And it's a big splash. These teams that win, we usually do an iPad. We usually do a small bonus. They get a chance to work with the innovation lab. There's at least one company-wide article that they're part of, really celebrating the win. And so it's so important to embed this into your program and really just for people to see that innovation is rewarded across the organization, celebrate. So with that, I want to spend just a couple of minutes talking, and I'll do this very, very quickly, but this is our innovation framework. Really, I think we hit on most of the points that we just covered, but basically we have an idea generation mechanism. We have a crowdsourcing platform. We talked about the operating model, so it's incremental model versus breakthrough. We have an innovation lab, which is really, really great. We're kind of the R&D idea accelerator arm of the organization. And then we have an innovation council, which helps us kind of manage the process. In the bottom left-hand corner there is kind of our operating model of the lab. High potential talent, we inspire a culture of innovation, which is really what we're talking about. So my operation is waking up every day thinking about how do we continue to inspire this culture of innovation? And then lastly, as part of our model, we mature and launch promising ideas. So that was a bit of a whirlwind, but I hope that that helps maybe spark an idea or spark something that's practical that you can take away as you kind of maybe continue down this journey or think about starting this journey of building a culture of innovation. So with that, I think we have plenty of time for questions. So Laura, did we have any questions come in?
Hi, yes, Todd, I did see one question that so far was, will we get a recording of this after? Very, very popular question. I honestly should always say that in the beginning of the presentation. But yes, we will be sending out an email afterwards with the recording of this presentation. We also put up all our webinars on YouTube on the IdeaScale channel.
Okay. It looks like maybe another one came in while you were talking.
Yes, and also feel free to unmute yourself and just ask your question live, or if you do not want to do that, you can put it in the Q&A tool.
Yeah.
All right, so next question. So you mentioned L&D quite a bit in today's training. Do you have your own learning management system that you build in-house context for, or do you gather those resources externally?
Yeah, so I'm glad you noticed that. So Chris, thanks for the question. It's critical, right? So I mean, kind of embedding learning and development, whether it's formal or it's informal, is really important. So to answer your question, we do. We use Workday for our kind of learning management system. And we did build those courses in-house. Ironically, we actually used a couple of interns at our innovation lab, and they worked directly with learning and development to build those courses. And again, just a quick refresh, we've got kind of a 10,000 foot view. So what is innovation? Why is it important in our company? And then we have more of that kind of practitioner's guide. So I hope that was helpful. We did work hand in hand. Now, I will say, gosh, I can't think of the name of the platform, but there are several learning platforms available, and we actually kind of baked these training courses inside of this platform, and then we kind of moved it into Workday. And the nice thing about if it's inside of Workday is you get metrics, so you can see how many employees have taken the course, level of engagement, that kind of thing. So okay, so what are some of now the questions are flowing in. This is great. What are some of your top recommendations for building incremental innovation, programs for those who aren't ready for big breakthrough ideas? Yeah, great question, Sarah. So, so top recommendations. So one of my recommendations would be to, again, kind of back to having some type of crowdsourcing platform technology solution. IdeaScale, Forrest, quick commercial. It's great. It does what we need it to do. It's not over-engineered. We actually have what we call an open-ended idea campaign for incremental innovation. So what I mean by open-ended is we don't have, like some campaigns are 3 weeks long or 6 weeks long, or whatever. This is an open-ended campaign. So anybody can go out there at any time and they can submit an idea. Others can vote on it, others can comment on it. So I think that's a great way to kind of start an incremental program. The challenge that I have seen organizations face is who runs these ideas, right? And who works these ideas. And so initially, when we launched our incremental program, we sort of took all comers. It didn't matter if your idea got a vote or got 500 votes. We were still going to work the idea. And I'm here to say that's not the best approach. So we started to use a threshold of 10 votes before an idea owner was assigned that actually worked that idea to completion or disposition. So I would recommend, again, you have to have some type of company-wide program. We launched, again, what's called an open-ended campaign. It's always on, and then put some structure around it. So it has to have 10 votes potentially, to get attention. Anything below that, just kind of stays there maybe until it gets 10 votes, or maybe it never does, and that's okay too. So, okay, so Natalie says, I would love to hear more about your innovation competition. So I'd love to tell you more about it. Here's how it works. We've done it for 2 years now, so we're definitely not experts. We'd like to see a lot more company involvement. We've got some ideas to really amplify this, but we call it our innovation idea accelerator. It's open to the entire company. We have teams pre-register. We do that because we ask that they give us just a high-level overview of the idea or concept they're thinking about, okay? The reason we do that is because most large organizations have ideas happening all over the place. And so we don't want a team to work for 6 weeks on an idea that is already in flight somewhere else. So we have a pre-registration. We ask that it's a cross-disciplinary team. So that kind of breeds collaboration, breeds sharing across our districts. And then the competition runs for 6 weeks. We give them kind of a framework to use. So here's kind of what your idea submission should include. And so here's where it gets really interesting. So let's say we have 20 idea submissions across the company. The Innovation Council, which we talked about, takes those ideas, again, uses kind of pre-established guidelines and winnows that down to 5. Okay, so 5 kind of semifinalists. And then from the 5, we open it back up to the entire organization for voting. And the 2 highest vote winners are our Idea Accelerator finalists. And so, that's where we do a lot of kind of hoopla around, the winners. And I reach out to them, and some members of my staff reach out to them, and we start to work with them to develop that idea. So that was it, kind of in a nutshell. But we're thinking about ideas to really amplify the program. I'd love to get 25 or 30 ideas, breakthrough ideas, each year. And so we've got some ideas to amplify that. So, all right, would you be able to share an example of one of the innovations you're proud of and how you took it through a prototyping implementation process? Sarah, I'd love to, but it's super proprietary, secret squirrel stuff. I can't share anything, but I'm just kidding. Let me think. So I'll tell you about an idea that we're currently actually a winner of our Idea Accelerator. And on its face, it might not sound super technical or technology driven, but one of the winning teams did quite a bit of research and came up with really a business plan of sorts to focus on the Hispanic or Spanish speaking market and culture. And, in our business, it's definitely an underserved market. And so I think it's an incredible idea. I'm not sure why it's never necessarily surfaced in the past. And I think it's got a high ceiling. And so our innovation lab is currently working with this winning concept team to come up with, um, what does that look like? What does that look like to really start to kind of serve this particular customer segment, understand this particular customer culture, and really start down that path. So we'll see where it goes. I'm excited by it. I know that's pretty high level, but hopefully that gives you a sense for one of the disruptive ideas that came in and that we're currently working with. How much of an issue is it that this is Ron's question? How much of an issue is it that many in the C-suite have little or no background in technology or the creation of digital services? How does this impact risk in managing change? Yeah, I probably glossed over this a little bit, but I mentioned in at least one of my slides that building a culture of innovation takes grit, it takes intentionality, it takes persistency, and it takes executive sponsorship. And so it can be a huge issue. I think it's a great question. We have been very deliberate about when we work ideas and we've selected particular ideas to move into our innovation portfolio. One of the first things that we look for is executive sponsorship. So who's willing to kind of pound their fist on the table and say, we've got to do this. This idea is amazing. We've got to have it. So I think it's really critical to understand some of the company dynamics and who are the individuals that are willing to be your sponsors, especially in the C-suite, because that will make a difference. So great question. Parth here asks, let's see, you talk about innovation, having an innovation council for a company that might not be able to have this council. How do you get stakeholder buy-in for innovation ideas or breakthrough projects that you might be thinking about? Yeah, it's a little harder when you don't have kind of a formal group who is acting, kind of the tip of the spear, I guess, as far as innovation goes. It might be more of a grassroots effort, and it could be a situation where maybe you don't have a council, but maybe you know of a vice president or a senior vice president who has an interest in innovation and is forward thinking, maybe more forward thinking than others. I think perhaps identifying that individual, working with that individual to help get some lift on a couple of ideas. And then the key is pick off some quick wins. I think once you have those under your belt, communicate those. Hopefully that executive is also sharing that success with his or her peers. I will say it's more challenging when you don't have kind of an innovation council or kind of an executive steering council. So, all right, who implements the ideas that get enough upvotes to move on to being piloted or implemented? Do you have a dedicated team, or is it handled by the idea submitter? A great question. I think this is Brianna's second. So we have a separate organization that is called our Quality and Service Solutions Group, and really they're focused on operations management, process improvement, process efficiencies, and so they are what are considered the idea owners. And again, that's once it reaches that threshold. So they're really responsible for working with the idea submitter to understand in the context of the idea, is it truly a problem worth solving? But they're really kind of on point for facilitating that process. My operation, as I mentioned, we stay pretty focused on the big rocks, but we do work closely with this group to, maybe answer questions, help facilitate the process. If you don't have a team that is at least semi-dedicated to kind of working these these smaller ideas, it is challenging. The idea submitter can only take it so far usually, but keeping them integral to the process is important because for some reason they have a passion for this idea. So, all right, when starting this program, what was your strategy for announcing the initiative to individual contributors and their involvement? So what was interesting about our approach was for many years we had a program called Spark, and we used kind of this homegrown platform that it didn't have a lot of the bells and whistles that that I thought we needed. Upvoting, commenting, kind of threaded discussions, and those types of things. And so what we did was we selected a crowdsourcing and idea management platform at the same time that we began announcing this kind of reemergence of innovation. And so we did a crowdsourcing campaign to name the program, or is this called Next, which I think is phenomenal. And then we started to communicate, and at the same time we folded that existing program called Spark into our incremental idea campaign. So now all of it's together. You've got an incremental campaign, formerly known as Spark. You've got disruptive stuff, breakthrough campaigns, and then later on we started to do some of the idea accelerator competitions and things like that. So it takes a lot of communication. It takes a lot of reminders. I'm sure our organization is like most, where everybody has kind of day jobs, and so you got to stay in front of people for them to really be purposeful about being part of innovation. Ron asks why, or while many people in enterprises realize the importance of disruptive innovation, we struggle with it. What's needed to make disruptive innovation more rewarding in enterprises? Some people just aren't necessarily strategic thinkers, and that's totally okay. I think that I think you have to identify who those kind of entrepreneurs are, and work specifically with those individuals to to start to kind of formulate a strategy for how to move disruptive innovation through an organization, to make it more rewarding. And I think a lot of the rewards are intrinsic. So if you keep someone as part of that process, keep them kind of again centered in that process, I think most people love that. If they can be part of that, and it gives them a chance to really kind of flex that that creative muscle, sometimes that's more than enough to keep people feeling like they're rewarded. So again, sometimes we reward people through fun stuff, or maybe there's a small bonus structure. We also have a separate it's called cause for applause, which is kind of a point system that is tied to our innovation program. So you get a certain number of points for submitting an idea. You get a certain number of points for commenting on the idea, and they have to be valid. So we've got some checks and balances in place to make sure that people aren't just commenting an idea and they say great comment, 200 points. So you've got to make sure that you've got some some balances, checks and balances there. So. All right. Are there any resources you would recommend that innovators should check out? Books, articles, people follow? I should be better at this question, Sarah. I mean, I love stuff like The Innovator's Dilemma. That's a pretty, it's probably 30 years old at this point. I have read a couple of books. There's one called The Startup Way. It's actually sitting on my desk here. It's by Eric Rice. It's how modern companies use entrepreneurial management to transform their culture and drive long-term growth. So it's called The Startup Way. I think this author has a couple of different leadership titles in this category. So that might be one to check out. Let's see. And then I think the last one is how do you manage the conflict between corporate innovation and the different business units? So kind of distributed innovation. This is an excellent question. Any good practices or tips? So so much of the success of innovation and building a culture of innovation depends on how your organization is structured. I've worked in companies who are very distributed. Currently, Graybar is one of those companies. And I've also worked in companies that are very unified in their approach. And so, I will say that the former, where it's distributed, is more challenging. You have to work harder. It's almost like you have to sell an idea multiple times. So, what my recommendation is in those particular situations is get a couple of these business units kind of in your hip pocket. Pick off a couple of good ideas that they have, and then all of a sudden, they're kind of leading the charge for innovation at your organization. If these business units and these different areas are so distributed and large enough to support maybe an innovation council at that level, go that direction. It just kind of depends. So you have kind of a center of excellence at the company level, and then you have these advisory councils, innovation councils, kind of out in these different business units. That's a much more complex structure, but it is doable. So you would kind of be the program management office of innovation, and then you have these kind of microcosms that exist out in the organization. So I think I got through all the questions. Laura, did you have anything else that you saw?
No, Todd, I believe that was all the questions. There was quite a lot of them. So thank you
They
so
were
much
amazing.
for answering all the great questions. It was very interesting to hear your responses to them. So thank you.
Yeah, very good. Thank you for the participation. I hope that was helpful. There were some doozies in there. So hopefully it gave you something to think about.
No, definitely. And Todd, thank you so much for hosting this webinar and providing such great content.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure.
Perfect. Well, that we can conclude this. And again, it will be sent out via email, and we'll also be putting it on our IdeaScale YouTube channel. So thank you again, everybody who attended. And again, thank you so much, Todd. This is a great presentation.
Yeah. Enjoy the rest of your week.
You as well. Bye, everybody.